So I'm going to talk to you about making some basic washes in watercolor. The first and most basic wash in watercolor would be a flat wash. So to do this, you're going to want to cover the whole page and you want it to be all one color. So you're going to need quite a bit of paint. And with watercolor, it's never about the paint itself. It is about the water. So I'm filling this cup up with lots of water. And it's got lots of paint in it as well. Hopefully enough that we can maybe put some in here too. So I can cover this whole thing with the same color. Now it may look like I have a very dark blue paint here, but in fact it's mostly water. So when you put it on the paper, we're going to see the white of the paper coming through. It's what we call a transparent wash. I'm going to use a fairly large mop brush for this. So it looks like this is oblong. And take it across all the way. The purpose of a flat wash is to really create a watercolor wash that looks like it's all one color, that doesn't have a lot of variation in dark and light. You don't really want to see stripes in it or a lot of action. It wants to look rather smooth. So you want to paint it across from one end to the other and then continue painting row after row. It helps to tip the paper a bit so that the paint runs down, and you want to keep that last edge, you want to keep that wet as you go. If it dries a little bit, you're going to have a dried edge that will be very noticeable. So just tipping it like this as I keep painting across that wet edge really is what makes this work. If I had it taped to a board, it might be a little bit easier to tip it, but for a small piece like I'm doing here, this works okay. It's a balance here between brushing out any of the variations I see and leaving it alone. So if I brush it out and it dries, that's a problem. So the variations you see here, most of them are just going to bleed out because the wash is still damp. You may notice here that the paper is bowing a little bit. That's because the wet side is expanding and the back side, which is dry, is shrinking. Now, if I had a really large piece of paper, I could use a bottle of water like this and spritz it on the back first thing, and that would alleviate the bowing problem. But with a small wash like this, it's going to dry just fine. Okay, so the second wash I'm going to show you is a gradation from the blue color to white. And I want to make sure my brush is nice and wet. I've got my colors mixed, and then I want to take my bottle of water and spritz the back of the paper so that it is nice and damp. So the paper here is all damp, so I'm going to dab some of that up with a paper towel. And then lay this down on a paper towel to actually do the wash. And notice now that it's been spritzed on the back, it's bowing again, so I'm going to lay it down and I'm going to spritz the other side, which I'm going to work on, so it's damp as well. Even though my water looks really dark blue in the jar, it really isn't as I brush it out on here. So this helps me get this really nice and damp so that I can start adding the paint onto it, and it's going to bleed out very easily. Here, I'm dabbing it on and I'm brushing across the top. And the edge is going to stay very wet for me. It's going to make it easier for me to keep a wet edge as I brush down. Adding more water to my brush. I'm going to brush this out now. Continuing to go one direction across. Brushing it across until it basically fades to white. Okay. I'm going to move this out of the way and see if I can get rid of that little blob that I have right here. But that's what I'm trying to get, Now, since it's all wet, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to take some more of this, darker, more paint, all the same color, and pull it across so that I can pull that blue down a little bit more. the transition. Still letting it fade to white. And there you go, a gradated wash. Okay, I'm going to set this aside to dry now. Now that they've had a chance to dry, here is the flat wash, and here is the gradated wash. Quite a bit lighter than it was when it was wet, but that is just really the nature of watercolor or working with anything that has transparent washes. You can expect it to dry about 30% lighter than the way it looks when it's wet. So you just want to anticipate that when you do your wash in the first place.